If you are 18 years old, the United States Senate did something today that it has never done in your lifetime. It passed an increase in taxes on the top tax brackets, and it did it this afternoon by a simple majority vote. Republicans dropped the procedural 60-vote hurdle in the Senate for this particular vote because they wanted to dare Democrats, see how many of them were willing to vote for a tax increase on incomes over $250,000. 51 Democrats voted for it. That's exactly the number that voted for it the last time they voted for it in 1993. Only 2 Democrats voted against it. In 1993, more Democrats voted against it than today. But the bill, of course, that was voted on today has absolutely no chance of becoming law because the House of Representatives will ignore it. And if the House of Representatives continues to ignore it for the rest of the year, you know what that means on New Year's Eve. After the Senate vote today, Senator Patty Murray, known on this program as Senator Thelma, said this.
I want you to give a big...
I guess not exactly that. Let's see. Senator Murray, I'll tell you what Senator Murray said. She said, oh, now we have it, I'm told. Now, let me just get this straight with the control room. Are we now going to run Senator Thelma or Barack Obama? Senator Thelma, here she goes.
There is one man standing at the wheel as we careen towards the fiscal cliff, and that is John Boehner. He can either pass this bill, which delivers certainty to middle-class taxpayers and, by the way, is a tremendous step towards addressing sequestration, or he can step on the gas, head towards that fiscal cliff, and strap the American people, just like a dog we know, to the top of his car.
President Obama now, time for President Obama, had this to say about the Democrats' tax bill.
So Republicans in Congress, they've decided, apparently, that they're not going to let this bill pass. Despite the fact that 98% of Americans make $250,000 a year or less, so we could provide 98% of Americans certainty that their taxes would not go up, despite the fact that this would be good for the economy and investment climate, they've decided to hold middle-class tax cuts hostage until we also agree to spend another $1 trillion on tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires, folks who don't need tax breaks, and frankly, many of them aren't even asking for them. Now, Governor Romney doesn't just approve of this strategy, he wants to import this into the White House.
Joining me now is Jared Bernstein, a senior fellow at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities and an MSNBC contributor. He's the former chief economist to Vice President Biden. Jared, you have to forgive me for getting all nostalgic here, watching that 51 votes for a tax increase on the top earners in the Senate today. I'll never forget that vote around this time of year, actually, in 1993. It was much tenser. It actually became law, and the economy soared after that particular tax increase. But it seems the Republican intransigence, as Patty Murray has identified it, is still going to send us on New Year's Eve off the cliff. And that may be the only way that we get sensible tax policy.
I agree with you. And I was also feeling a sense of almost, well, elation is too strong a word because we know where this is going given the dysfunction in the House. But the idea that a majority in the Senate, and we didn't have to, because this was not a procedural vote, the Republicans put aside the filibuster on this one, we actually had a majority vote in the Senate to do something smart today, which was to add some revenues to our budget situation so we can achieve a kind of sustainable path that we simply can't do on spending cuts alone. Now, we're back to Alice in Wonderland very quickly because Mitch McConnell himself said this is meaningless, it's just procedural, the House isn't going to take it up. We know that's true. But there was a tiny sliver of light there. And I think when you couple that with your points about Patty Murray's strategy, which is one that I very much endorse. I don't love it, but I endorse it. I think it's the right way to go. Maybe there's some light on the other side of this cliff, if you'll excuse the metaphors.
Jared, I just want to clarify the technical point of what was actually voted on today, because I've kind of lazily described it as a vote for a tax increase. But right. technically, where we are now in law, it's different. Since the law is currently written that on January 1st, all tax rates will go up. What the Democrats actually voted for today was a tax reduction for all starting on January 1st for all of the rates below the top tax rates. And they simply did not vote for a tax reduction on the top rates. And so Claire McCaskill and some of the Democrats that the Republicans wanted to dare into casting that vote can very honestly claim what they voted for today was actually a tax cut.
Right. And in fact, interestingly, and the president alluded to this, 98% of households would benefit from that tax cut. And that's something that, of course, everyone agrees on. The squabble is, of course, over the 2%. But you're absolutely right. And this is the reason why the logic of going over the fiscal cliff makes sense. Because once you go over the cliff, taxes reset to where they were back before the Bush tax cuts took place in 2001. At that point, all the Grover Norquist and the pledge silliness is off the table. At that point, members of Congress can vote for a very significant tax cut to reach the middle class, like the Senate did today, and simply leave the upper income rates reset where they are. That represents, as the president said, $1 trillion of needed revenue over the next 10 years on the one group who's benefited from growth in recent years.
I want to listen to the president doing his part in making it very clear that the Democrats are willing to go off the cliff. This is really scaring and shaking the Republicans. But the president's doing it now in local interviews on the campaign trail. Let's listen to how it goes in this interview.
Will you veto any legislation that extends all of the Bush tax cuts, even to what you call the wealthy?
Yes, and the reason is we can't afford it. It would not make sense for us to give folks like me or Mr. Romney or Mr. Buffett another $1 trillion in tax cuts that we don't need.
And Jared, as you know, this strongly empowers the Democrats in the Congress. The president's saying, look, even if they did pass it, which they can't without Democratic votes, he would veto it. And so this showdown is just getting closer and closer every day.
The thing that I took from today's vote and from the kind of attitude you just heard from the president is that the Democrats have real spine here. And it's something, frankly, we haven't always seen enough of. The 51 votes today to allow those top rates to increase on the 250,000 plus group, that 2% at the top, along with the White House's consistent stance on this, Patty Murray and her stance, and I very much applaud the attention that you've been bringing to that, Lawrence. That sounds to me like something that is very much ingrained in their strategy now. And frankly, the Republicans, I believe, are starting to understand that.
Yeah, and Democrats and the president have gotten a lot of criticism over the years for not hanging tough. They are hanging tough on this, and they are doing it for very, very sound policy reasons. Jared Bernstein, thank you for joining me tonight in our Off the Cliff segment for tonight. Thanks, Jared.
Sure.
Coming up, Mitt Romney didn't go to London today to face questions about his income taxes, but Brian Williams was there to ask him why he's not releasing his tax returns. And sometimes Bill O'Reilly can be, quote, so dumb it hurts. Those are Bill's words, not mine. And Bill O'Reilly is in the rewrite tonight.